Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to this live IRE virtual edition presentation of current COVID-19 legal issues. I'm very excited about today's presentation to today's panel. Obviously, COVID-19 has changed the world forever. I remember being at IRE in February last year, and there was some discussion about COVID-19, but we had no idea really what was to come. And ever since March of 2020, we've had to change how we do business. We've had to change how we go to market. We've had to change how we communicate. We've had to change our safety, our HR, our contracts, everything. Okay, while vaccines are promising, navigating these issues has become a full-time job. There are a lot of pressing legal issues that happened in 2020 and that I anticipate will continue to happen in 2021. So what I wanted to do is touch on these issues, discuss the legal ramifications, but then turn it over to our esteemed panel. And really what I want to do is kind of end with, what does the future hold for the roofing industry after COVID-19? So let me introduce you to this great panel that we've got today. And I feel very fortunate and blessed to have these people with me. I consider each of them my friends. So first and foremost, we've got Michelle Boykin, COO of Rackley Roofing. Now, for those of you that don't know Rackley Roofing, they are a top 100 roofing contractor, well known throughout Tennessee and beyond for their excellence in roofing. They've won Innovator of the Year by RT3. But Michelle in particular, when she's not a CEO for Rackley Roofing, I don't know how she finds the time to do what she does. She is heavily involved in National Women in Roofing, RT3, and many other organizations. Very, very happy to have you here, Michelle. Looking forward to hearing your comments today.
Thank you. I'm excited.
So next we've got Ken Kelly, and Ken, consider Ken a friend. I've known him for quite a while now. Ken is CEO of Kelly Roofing, a generational roofing company in South Florida. Has won Roofing Contractor of the Year by Roofing Contractor Magazine. Is well known for his innovation, his technology, his cutting edge techniques and go-to-market tactics. He is a brilliant guy. I live vicariously through Ken. So Ken, it's a pleasure to have you here, man. I'm really looking forward to hear what you got to say today.
Thanks. I'm happy to help others.
And then, of course, we've got John Kenny. I am fortunate enough to work with John on a daily basis. For those of you that don't know John, he's got 45 years experience in this industry. I always like to say he went from the rooftop to the boardroom. He has worked at multiple top 100 roofing contractors in key positions, including chief estimator, vice president, and chief operating officer. And now he serves as CEO of our consulting group. He works with roofing contractors on a daily basis to discuss business operations, estimating, and other concerns. So John, very interested to hear what's going on out there in the world, and glad to have you here with us today.
Okay, thank you. Very glad to be a part of the panel.
And then I'm going to help moderate today. I'm Trent Cotney. I'm CEO of Cotney Attorneys and Consultants. I serve as general counsel for a variety of roofing associations, including NRCA. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation today and what the panel's got to say. So let's get right to it. The first thing that I really had to deal with from a legal basis was combining the changes that I saw from a legal perspective to this new world order as it relates to business. Now, one of the key things is how we communicate, right? I mean, look how I'm communicating with you right now. It's via Zoom, whether it's Teams, Zoom, GoToWebinar. That's how things are getting done now, right? And it's not just sales, it's not just operation meetings, but from a legal perspective, a lot of the key safety training, toolbox talks, HR training, it's all happening virtually. How we communicate on a job site is kind of turned to that. And what's interesting is that for the first time that I can really remember it, safety and legal has become a huge selling point. Now, everybody hates lawyers, myself included, but this was an opportunity, at least what we saw in 2020 and what I continue to see, to use legal as a way to differentiate yourself in the market. So one of the things that I saw early on was some reticence by homeowners or commercial owners or general contractors to engage roofing contractors because of their concerns about possibly getting COVID-19, right? So developing job site safety plans that talked about how you were going to handle, sanitizing the job site, keeping your workers safe, engaging in CDC and OSHA related protocols. That was a huge selling point that allowed a lot of roofing contractors to get jobs and still to get jobs. Okay. In addition to that, We saw the implementation of safety sign-off sheets, which allowed the customer to know that the contractor was actively engaging in a process to make sure that the job site was safe and that they weren't going to be spreading COVID-19. And of course, one of the things that causes me concern in the legal realm is we've all gone through, quite a tumultuous last year. What I don't want to have happen is I don't want the army of plaintiffs lawyers out there to start suing roofing contractors for the unintentional exposure of COVID-19. So, dealing with releases and waivers and things of this nature has become commonplace, regardless of whether it's at a meeting or if it's you engaging directly with your customer. So this is really the first question that I want to tender over to the panel. And Ken, I'd like to start with you. I'd like to know, how have you changed your business since COVID-19? How have you adapted, and what can you share with the audience?
Sure. No, I appreciate that, Trent. And first, let me start by saying, when this first happened and we realized that there was a pandemic that was going to change society and the way we were doing business, you were the resource out there. You were out there daily doing social posts and articles, webinars, short videos. And, because we utilize your services, we had direct interaction with your team, and they helped us help guide us through this time. And I just wanted to say thank you. I mean, you were the beaming light of direction, because the truth is there wasn't great direction and there was a lot of misdirection. So being able to not step on a landmine as you're changing your business. If you think about it, there was a period of time where they basically said, you're not working. You cannot go to work, right? It was 15 days turned into 30. And there was somewhat of a Wolf of Wall Street moment in our company where I said, we ain't stopping, right? They're going to have to pull us down off roofs in handcuffs because we're not going to stop work. And fortunately, we live in Florida, and Florida is kind of one of those states that stayed open, and we didn't have the mask mandates, and we've been doing pretty good. Now, that's not to say we didn't have issues with COVID. So what did we do early on? Early on, we went, like you suggested, and like the government was telling us, we went virtual. We sent everyone home that wasn't absolutely necessary at a physical location. The crews still came in, so we still needed, for instance, a mechanic. We still needed the crews to come and pick up trucks in the morning, but we allowed them to take their own personal vehicles to the job site so that they could space out and not be all together in one vehicle. And then after about 30, 45 days, we said, well, it's time to start coming back into the office. And we had some people who didn't want to come back. We had two individuals who said, we're not coming. We haven't left our house. We don't go to the grocery store. We're not going in public. And I said, well, the company's coming back together. So I tell you what we're going to do. We're going to put you in charge of making sure that we're safe. And they came up with a list of things that they required. One of them was a full-time cleaning person to go through the office and just make rounds, cleaning doorknobs and bathrooms and countertops and all that kind of stuff. Temperature checks in the morning for everyone that was coming in, making sure people were wearing their masks. Even though they weren't required in our county, there were some that felt more comfortable wearing them. So we asked them we asked everybody to wear them early on, and that helped a lot. Some other things that we were able to rely on was our software system, because immediately when we went home and started working remotely, fortunately, we have a good software system that allowed us to work remotely. It's not like we had a server in the office that had all of our files. We're cloud-based organizations, so we could work at home, and that really helped us a lot. And then also, maybe later, I'll get into how we changed our sales presentation, but that went through phases. And the first phase was certainly trying to be more respectful to where our consumers are. We're in an area that has a lot of elderly and retirees, and we have to absolutely be respectful of that. So questions on the phone like, are you comfortable with somebody visiting your house? And if you're comfortable, can we go on the roof to do an assessment? And is it okay to talk to you at the front door? And they'll tell you, listen, no, I'm not going to let anyone in the house and whatnot. So we set up what we call the driveway sales presentation, 2 fold-up chairs, tailgate drops, set up the whole thing. And, you have the 2 homeowners sitting there spaced out, comfortable. Our masks are on, their masks are on. And we went through our full demo like we would normally do at the facility or at the home, but still respecting all the social distancing guidelines. So those are some of the things that helped early on, and I hope to get in a little bit more later.
Great. Thanks, Ken. And, I was thinking of you when this whole thing first started. Those contractors that embrace technology, and Michelle, you're one as well. I really think that you guys were well positioned to sort of ride the wave of the change that happened. So it's interesting to hear you say some of that, and I think that is something that hopefully will resonate. If you haven't engaged in technological upgrades, this is here to stay to a certain extent. So I definitely see that as a future trend. Michelle, let me turn to you. You guys obviously have a very large commercial practice. You're throughout Tennessee and beyond. How were you guys, how did you decide to change what you were doing once COVID-19 hit? Are there any things that you guys did in particular that kind of help you adjust in a way and evolve so that you were still, engaging the customer, still, closing sales, doing everything that you had to do in order to maintain your business?
Well, Trent, I think you made a very good point. A lot of us contractors that were already kind of technologically savvy, innovative, all those sorts of things, we were already prepared for a situation like this. And not to make light of the virus, but for our field employees, their day-to-day didn't really change. We always have dispatched, not always, but for the past several years, have dispatched from our homes. Our techs take their trucks home. They're dispatched from their homes. So they're getting all their information on their phones. They're turning in their paperwork and their photos via their phones. So all that never changed for them. The only thing that changed for us as far as technologically, we sent our office staff home to work from home. And so basically everybody picked up their computers, whether that was a laptop or a desktop, and they took it home with them. And our phones are such that you can plug them into any sort of internet connection and you have a phone connection. So, we could transfer phone calls from whoever to the next person. So that was a very easy transition for us. We already did our toolbox talks and our safety, our safety check-ins. Those were already done digitally. So again, that wasn't a change for us. We did, change some of the topics. We added in some COVID-19 topics, and being part of RT3, Harness had an app that they came out with just specifically for COVID-19 toolbox talks. We took advantage of that. So we really leaned on the industry. Trent, we leaned on you and all of your Facebook posts to kind of keep up with what the new guidelines were, what we needed to be doing, and what we needed to do to, mitigate risk. We cut, when we did come back to the office, similar to Ken, we kind of did it in phases. We brought back our leadership team to test out safety. Where were we lacking? What did we need to do differently? And then we started bringing back more people. And at first we made it, you could decide if you wanted to stay home or if you wanted to come into work. And then eventually we did say, no, everybody needs to come back, because we saw, started to see sort of a diminish in productivity and culture. So we wanted to make sure that we kept who we are as a company close and make sure that we still had that feel that you get as a family. But when we did start to do that, and we're in Tennessee, so restrictions similar to Florida, they were limited. We weren't New Jersey, we weren't Seattle, we weren't some of those places that stayed shut down for a really long time. And we started trying to do in-person meetings if we could, but we did them outside when the weather was nice. We spray painted our parking lot, so we were social distancing. Everybody was wearing masks, and we did that as we could, but we kept that as small as we could. And we limited that. We relied heavily on Zoom, but we did that anyways because we have multiple offices across the state of Tennessee. So we were already familiar with the platform, and it wasn't anything new for us. So we really just tried to make sure that life could be as normal as possible for our employees, but be safe as well.
Right. And I think, the comment that you made about maintaining the culture, I think is a critical point there. I know you and Curtis and the rest of the management team at Rackley, even though you're a large company, you have a familial type environment. And that's one of the things that I think is important to kind of note, that despite all of this change and all the stress and everything else, you've got to maintain that culture. So I think that's a really good point. John, I want to turn to you and ask you, you work with roofing contractors. What, over the course of the last year, how have they kind of dealt with COVID-19? What were some of the things that you've been hearing and that you can kind of enlighten our audience on, as far as whether it's sales, operations, anything that they've changed for COVID-19?
Sure. Definitely agree with the group. If you were technologically advanced in your company, you fended a lot better through COVID than if you weren't. So we've worked with a lot of clients, getting them up to speed with technology over the last year. And also in areas that were locked down more, we did have clients we worked with in New Jersey and out in the West Coast, and even in Chicago, they got hit pretty hard with shutdowns too. They faced a lot more operational challenges in those areas, getting out to work, being able to work, a lot more temperature checks on job sites if they were able to, if they were even able to get on them. So they probably faced that for about the first almost 6 months in certain areas, and still ongoing to some extent. Found with them operationally, a lot of the building owners are still very resistant on how things are working now with COVID and that. So I think a lot of the changes that you've seen with technology and Zoom meetings and different things that we have done in the industry is here to stay. There'll always be, this will always be a big part of it, along with getting back to some in person. But we are finding a trend out there on the sales side that a lot of customers really are adapting to the newer technology, not having in-person meetings with sales. One is they have a lot of people involved that may have a buyer that's in charge of the project. They may be in another state. Rather than flying everybody in, they're really getting used to it. So I would say definitely get your sales teams trained up to get used to doing these online sales meetings, because I think they're here to stay in a greater proportion than a lot of other stuff. So that's what we've seen around there in the entire industry over last year.
Yeah, agreed. I think you're going to start seeing a hybrid, even if things were to open up fully. We've learned a lot of lessons over the last year. There's a lot of efficiencies to be had through some of these meetings. And of course, I would much rather be talking to you guys in person and seeing you in person, and not to diminish that, but I do think that some of this is here to stay. Next thing I really want to talk about is the impact on your projects themselves, right? And the biggest issue that I have seen in the last year has been a just astronomical increase in delay-related claims and delay-related defenses. And we track all of the data that comes in on any of our cases, whether it's in litigation or arbitration. And I can tell you that we're at about a 31% increase in delay-related claims year over year. Now, that's primarily related to COVID-19 suspensions and shutdowns. And one of the big things that I like to hit home to roofing contractors, especially if you're doing commercial work, is you are going to submit a change order for extra cost. Okay, you're good at doing that. You're not so good at doing time extension requests. Okay, and even if it rains, you need to be documenting the fact that you're entitled to additional time. Okay, and that is absolutely critical, because what I've saw is that the poor, papering the file ends up getting you, especially if you've got a liquidated damages claim or something coming down upstream that could potentially affect you on a job. So the other thing that I saw was, oftentimes in these shutdowns or these suspensions on job sites, there's this cost. There's this cost associated with doing that. There's demobilization and mobilization costs that aren't accounted for. So making sure that you submit change orders or a claim related to that could be the difference in you making any net profit on that job and not. Okay, and one of the biggest things is securing your job site materials. We're representing a roofing contractor right now that had over a $600,000 loss in materials. And I don't care how big you are, $600,000 hurts, right? So obviously there's insurance issues, there's all these other issues, but really, one of the things that we saw was who was securing that job site, who was protecting your equipment and materials if they're still on there, okay? And do you want to repo them temporarily? Do you want to put them in your yard? Those were all things that we had to kind of navigate. Now, this next item is something that is a current issue, okay? Increased material cost. It is affecting every roofing contractor out there. If it hasn't affected you yet, trust me, it's coming. Okay, we saw increased lumber prices, right? That was last year. Okay, we've seen steel go up. Price of steel has gone up. We've seen issues with supply chain as it relates to shingles. I anticipate asphaltic-based materials are going to increase as a result of the Texas refinery shutdown. So all of these things cause me some concern, because we have a lot of contractors that are locked into material prices, but haven't taken into account things like this. And if you're on a longer duration project, regardless of whether it's residential or commercial, you've got some exposure there, right? So we advocate that you put a price acceleration provision in your contract that allows you to recover cost in the event that any material line item goes up by more than 5%. Things like that will protect you. If you don't have that in there and you go to the customer, there's no additional consideration for you to get paid that extra money. So it's something that you need to contemplate at the forefront, especially now for your bids and your contracts that you're submitting. So the other thing that we've had to kind of figure out is how to navigate all these delay damages, consequential damages, damage waivers. It has become more prevalent in the last year because of COVID-19. If you are a subcontractor, a roofing subcontractor on a job, the general is going to stick it to you. Okay, so you need to figure out how to navigate these damages at the forefront and make sure that, again, you are papering the file. So let me take a step back. Now, for those of you that are listening to this, and please pay attention to this point, okay? When you are submitting documentation upstream, regardless of whether it's change orders, RFIs, even daily reports, you need to advocate, okay? And for those of you that have seen me speak in the past, I always say if it's good for you, put it in writing. If it's bad for you, pick up the phone, okay? If you're submitting an RFI, or request for information, to an architect or an engineer asking for something, it should be written in such a way that the only answer is yes, this is extra work and you are entitled to more money, okay? If you didn't take the time to advocate, then you're not doing yourself a favor, right? And you're not putting yourself in a good position if that becomes Exhibit A in an arbitration or court case, okay? Keep in mind, daily reports. Oftentimes people, your superintendent, your crew leader, whoever it is, might have to fill out a daily report. You're just putting down basic information. These 4 guys showed up, they did this, they did that. Put self-serving information in there. Did a safety check out there. Everybody was compliant. The HVAC contractor is delaying my job. Now that goes upstream to somebody. Is that sufficient notice under the contract? No, maybe not, could be, but I'd rather have that than not have that. So that's what I'm telling you is think about it. Think about it. Any claim that you're making, you need to advocate, okay? Follow the process. The process in these contracts has become incredibly important. One of the things that I do when I'm looking to help a roofing contractor is I go through the process and I say, okay, if you've got 10 days to respond to something, did you respond when you were supposed to? If not, that's something we got to figure out a way around. And again, maintain your backup. Okay, don't submit change orders or RFIs or anything without the sufficient paperwork. So what I want to do now is I want to turn to you guys, and Michelle, I'm going to start with you. And I just want to know, have you experienced delays or suspensions or shutdowns on jobs? And more importantly, what kind of material shortages or material price increases have you seen in your area?
Well, I think for us, we were blessed in the fact that we've spent the last few years really zoning in on who we want to do business with, and that's customer base and that's vendor base. And we've been very picky on that. So when it came to a delay, we already knew that the customer trusted us, we trusted the customer, and so we were very transparent. So we were picking the phone up, hey, if the customer said, hey, we've got this delay because we don't know what funding is going to happen because of COVID, or, we've got a crew that's out sick or something like that, we were having conversations about that. And so we did see a few delays. We did not see anything totally canceled for us. But again, we're in Tennessee. We got hit hard by a tornado about 2 weeks prior to COVID. So we were considered essential from the moment anything happened. So we're in a different situation than I think some other states were. But again, we had that open dialogue. We were really communicating that information. And then we started to work on protecting ourselves for the future. So we got that, legal language for COVID-19 that we needed to have in our contracts going forward. We've always done the daily reports, and you're right. You typically say, well, we did this today, and we had 4 guys on the crew, and they worked until 2 p.m. or whatever that is. And now we're adding that extra information. Here's what the weather was like. We did the safety checkup. We had a quality control inspection from, our crews today. We started adding that extra information and really trying to go overboard on documentation and paperwork so that we were covered, but also so that our customers knew that we were doing what we said we were going to do. And I think that has helped. And then with vendors, we had the same conversations. Hey, we know that material pricing has gone up, but we had this huge job. We already had it in the works. Is there a way that we can work this out? And, we've had some vendors that have helped us, keep the costs down as we can, push it to the future if we could. really just try to work together as a team so that we're all in it together. And if we're going to lose money, let's lose money together. And if we're going to make money, let's make money together, and just really work as a team. And that's helped out a lot for us.
So I hope everybody just listened to that, because that is a critical point. And my dad used to always tell me, he'd say, it's not the customers that you take that make you a great business, it's the customers you don't take, okay? What I saw was a very bad trend when this COVID-19 thing first hit. A lot of contractors were out there taking everything off the streets, okay? And while that might help your gross profit, gross profit doesn't put money in your pocket. It's that net profit that we're all looking for, right? So that is some sage advice. Know who you're working with, develop those relationships with your suppliers, lean on them when you need to. And that is something that I hope is hitting home to the audience. John, I want to turn to you next. What have you heard about, material shortages in particular for the roofing contractors out there?
I'd say on a national basis, the two biggest things right now is leading the front is shingles. Depending on the area, and there's a lot of shingle delays, and we're not out of winter yet. So I think once you get out of, winter really breaks in a lot of areas, I think you can expect some delays to increase in that. Some areas are experiencing lumber. Even though lumber prices are going through the roof, there are certain types of lumber that are hard to get, even shortage on some sheathing and that. I don't think it's due to anything other than just a lot of logistics, prices going up, lumber logistics and different things that go with it. I don't know if it's going to be a lasting trend, but I think the material prices are. Other than that, I don't think we have any major shortages than normal. Things seem to be flowing. I haven't got any insight that there's going to be shortages of, single ply materials or anything like that. It seems to be okay. There was a little worry of that earlier with the plant shutdowns. They seem to be out of that. I do think you're going to see an increase in pricing due to the oil. You brought a very good point up earlier, Trent. The gasoline, even here in the state of Florida, has gone up 30 cents since they had the shutdown. So that's all going to reflect into manufacturing, and really oil is almost into everything that you put on a roof, even if it's a EPDM product or there's some sort of oil base that's in there somewhere. So I think you're going to see that. You did Michelle brought up a great point. I'll just get on that. We are seeing a tremendous amount of collection issues right now. People are slower at paying. Even good customers were slower at paying. There seems to be some money flow issues, I think, that are starting to catch up. So I would definitely keep my eye on that as a contractor out there right now.
Great. Well, thank you, John. And, Ken, I want to turn to you, and in your market, how did you have any delays or things that impacted your ability to do jobs on a timely basis? And more importantly, how are materials looking down in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so we certainly had issues early on, especially with products that were made overseas. There's some specialty flashings, for instance, that are made in Germany. And when we first got wind that they weren't going to be available, we went nationwide and bought up all of that product that was available, $192,000 investment that sat in our shop. And it made it almost full 6 months. And luckily, that's about when products started flowing again. So today, obviously, shingle, big issue. Fasteners are an issue. Underlayments right now are an issue, especially under tile and metal, the high temp type products. But you know what I think is happening? I don't know if this is manufacturers using COVID as an excuse, or if it's just simply as robust as our industry is, our vertical is right now. What people don't realize is we were on the chopping block. And I think we all owe the NRCA, and specifically Reed Ribble, a great big thank you. Because while guidance and legislation was being written, it was Reed staying up until wee hours in the morning, calling friends that he had from his time in Congress. He was really advocating for our industry and construction as a whole to be considered essential. And you don't realize we were going the way of restaurants. And that's really helped us, because what happened was people went home and they're staring at their honey-do list, or how small it is, or the improvements that they've been putting off. They said, I'm going to be here. Now is the time to take care of it. So our industry has gone through somewhat of a renaissance in a few of the specific sectors. And I think that's helped us all. And what it's done is put a strain on manufacturing. And usually the winters are harsh and long, and it gives manufacturing an opportunity to catch back up. And we really didn't hit the super cold spots until mid-February. So, construction's been continued robust. So I don't know that we have a very good amount of inventory going into, which is typically the busiest season, spring. And I expect those to continue. So we're stocking up on material, and we're not the only ones. So I think we're perpetuating this issue, because as soon as someone hears nails are in shortage, everyone goes buys the last couple of pallets that were available to supplier. And whether that was true or not, it is now, right? So, it's these rumors that are circulating, and then there's the price increase notices. I remember back in 2006 and 7, we were getting price increases every single month. And they were 2, 3, 4%. It was like death by 1,000 cuts, right? Because you really didn't know if it was going to stick, and you didn't know if you needed to up your pricing. Today, we're getting price increases 15 to 20%. The asphalt, metals, fasteners, all those things. My God, those are massive amounts of increases, right? That's your entire bottom line if you average that over the price of a job. We really need to stay ahead of this. So whereas I usually do price increases to our sales system, our pricing program every quarter, I'm doing them multiple times a month right now just to try to stay ahead of it, because there is a buying cycle. The estimates you're given today, you're not doing for 90 days plus. So stay ahead of it and try to add in maybe that 3-5% buffer overall in the price, so that you're ready when it does come through.
Well, that's great advice, Ken. And yeah, to echo your statements earlier, we all owe a big thanks to Reed Ribble, Dwayne Musser, Terry Dorn, the whole lobbying team over at NRCA. They were really on top of things. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Roofing Day coming up in just a few weeks. To go to nrca.net for more information. So it's always important to have our voices heard. And I believe that, you've got to be there. You got to be there and be seen. So I want to talk a little bit about safety now. And safety's changed a lot. As I mentioned at the beginning, safety has always been paramount for all of us, right? We all want our employees to go home safe every single day. That's never in question. But really, the appearance of safety from our customers became more and more important. And one of the things that we advocated early on was to make sure that you are drilling home COVID-19 protocols. Now, when COVID first hit, in February, March of last year, there wasn't a significant amount of information out there. We all looked at the CDC. OSHA had some guidance, but there wasn't a specific rule. And I'm sure you guys experienced the same thing that I did. The rules kept changing. I mean, you could go county to county and there would be different rules. So it was very hard to keep up with this. Now, one of the things that we saw is as OSHA, whether it's federal or state plans, really started to kick the inspections into high gear, one of the first questions that they would often ask crew members is, have you been trained on COVID-19 protocols? Okay, and that's an easy citation for anybody to get. I saw this happen a lot in California, Michigan, some of the other state plans in particular. So making sure that you are engaged in toolbox talks specifically for COVID-19, not just at the home office, but on the job site. Okay, training is always where you start. You want to have that follow through. Now, on the job site, you're probably wondering, Trent, you keep talking about sanitizing the job site. I'm not talking about spraying Lysol on a pile of rubble. What I'm talking about is making sure that you're thinking about the common working surfaces, whether it's ladders or nail guns, your trucks, your crew cabs. What are you doing to make sure that that job site is protected, not just for your employees, but also to sell to your customers, to say, look, this is what we're doing. We take safety seriously. This is all the different steps that we're engaged in. Training those superintendents and the people that are out there running that job, whether it's a crew leader, foreman, whatever you want to call them, if they're out there, they have got to be able to identify the signs of illness, not just for their crew, but for subs that may be working under you. And just like it's their responsibility to identify the signs of impairment. So whether it's, marijuana usage or opioid abuse or whatever it might be, they've got to be able to say, okay, you don't look well. It looks like you've got a fever. You look sick. You've got to be able to pull them off the job site and be able to send them home, because if you don't, you potentially run the risk of contaminating that job site. And we had a lot of issues with contractors that shut down enormous multi-million-dollar jobs because they didn't engage in proper COVID-19 protocols. Again, don't care about the politics. Don't care what you think about it. This is just strictly liability, okay? And in that particular instance, when this giant job shut down, what do you think that contractor got stuck with? A huge claim. Okay, so that's the kind of thing you just want to be thinking about it. How can you be safe, and how can you show your customer and the people upstream that you're safe? One of the interesting things that we saw with safety is a lot of the times, a lot of the things that you couldn't do, you can't normally ask your employees about their illnesses, or you can't get too in depth about their medical well-being. But with COVID, a lot of that changed. You can ask very specific questions about whether or not they've been exposed or exhibiting symptoms. You can engage in temperature checks. And all of that has been really something that's been important that we've seen been implemented by almost every roofing contractor out there. What I want to ask you guys is from a safety perspective, you talked a little bit about toolbox talks, and you've talked about some of the things you've done, but as it relates to your job site in particular, what are you doing different now from a safety perspective? Talk a little bit more detail about the type of education you've been providing, and maybe some additional factors that you're considering. And John, I want to start with you on this one. I know you've talked to a lot of roofing contractors about safety, especially, both in residential and commercial. And, what are you hearing out there?
Yeah, we're working with a few of the affiliate associations where their members are on the same subject, doing monthly meetings. So one of the things where, like you brought up a great point. Let's jump back. Regardless of what state you're in, what rules you have, or what side of the bench you are believing, mask, not mask, it doesn't really matter. This is being driven by customers in litigation of the future. And definitely I see that it's not going to go away. Whether it's COVID-19, I think you're going to see these pandemic type clauses stay in there because they're going to be prepared for the next one. Customers are liking the fact that they can get you to get your trucks clean before workers go in and out. You're taking temperatures. They're documenting. I'm seeing that out there. So, some of the things that we've recommended doing these talks with different ones, you got to have a clean area. OSHA requires that. You have to have somewhere on a job site where they can clean their PPE and their tools. You also are required to do the access points on the ladder to wipe down, and the tools, even ripping bars and power equipment. They are all required. So you're going to have to document this. That's the whole key, whether you do it electronically or you have a checklist. The owners want to see it. The customer wants to see it. And I'm sure down in OSHA, of course, is if they come out, they're going to want to see it. And I think, Trent, as you said, I think this is going to be the litigation factors of the future. So the better that you have your paper set up now, and your files and your procedures, the better off you're going to be down the line.
It's a great point. And, we've really tried to monitor what we anticipate OSHA is going to do with regard to COVID-19. The latest that I've heard is that there is going to be an emergency temporary standard that's going to be put in place here shortly that deals with COVID-19 and infectious diseases. To date, they've been using other, rules in order to enforce a lot of the safety. This one is going to be very specific. So you can expect under the Biden administration that you're going to see enhanced rulemaking, enhanced inspections, and citations. So be aware of this. I anticipate in the next month, you'll probably see something. Ken, I want to turn to you. You mentioned a little bit about some of the stuff that you guys are doing, but, talk to me in particular about, customer interactions on safety and what you guys are doing to help ease the concerns that are out there and keep your employees safe.
Sure. So customers, you just have to go in with the assumption that they are taking COVID very seriously, and you have to show that we are as well. That's not always the case. There are some customers who say, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's no big deal." And it said, "No, I just prefer to protect us both." Right. And most people are pretty cool with that. So just kind of go in with that and make sure that they feel comfortable. Do the pre-checks before you send anyone out. Make sure that's okay. Let them know what date and time you're arriving, confirm the appointments, those type of things. But more importantly, I think John really touched on an important area, and that is, how are you documenting this? Because we're talking about experience now that we have, and I wish we knew this early on, but it seemed like when we had one person that was infected, we would pull that one person out, and then the next thing you know, another person on the crew came up positive, and then another. So we got to the point very early on where we just sat the entire crew, knowing that it was going to be an issue, right? The whole crew was going to get it anyways, but at least it allowed them to separate. Another thing we did is we realized that therapeutics actually helped. They shortened the time frame of those who are infected, and it lessened the severity of the symptoms. So we worked with my personal doctor, and he started seeing our guys and gals early on, and everyone knew that they could just go see Dr. Greg, and Greg would help them with something to help make this go by faster. And, a couple other things. We never took the 941 extensions. We didn't want to push off a mountain of a bill that could be coming down the road. Every morning, our HR director sends out an email to all the supervisors. The supervisors interview all of the crew leaders interview and do temperature checks on all of the crew members. And that's all documented. So we have a paper trail every single day. We have a back to work status for anyone that was infected, who kind of a contact tracing, who they were, what crew they were on, who they were in contact with, which job site they were on, notifying the customers that there was a COVID positive that was working on their job site. And that really hasn't been a big deal because we're usually up and away from customers. So that hasn't been a big area of concern. But I just wanted to kind of point out that the paper trail behind it for us was a real important part, and communications obviously critical as well.
So that's a critical point, Ken. If not only is that important to show what you are doing internally, but if it ever comes to a time where, whether it's OSHA or whether it's, any other, safety related entity that wants to come in and see what you're doing, you can show what you did, and yes, you can tell people what you did, but if you have a document to back it up, in my opinion, it carries more weight, right? And it shows a trend of what you were doing. So yeah, absolutely. Like I said, paper the file. If it's good for you, put it in writing. Definitely do that. Michelle, what about you guys? You had a lot of interesting things happen in Tennessee with the storms, not to mention, COVID-19, a lot of different, potential safety issues all over the place. What did you guys do to kind of pivot once all this happened?
I think we did like most contractors and immediately bought all the masks and hand sanitizer and soap that you could possibly buy. And we tried to make sure that we always had that in stock for our employees, both in the office and in the field. We require self-screenings every day. We, ask that people take their temperatures at home, just because we feel like that's something that they can do. Why get out in your car and go somewhere if you have a fever, so do it from home. But we do offer, thermostat, temperature screenings anywhere that we're at. So in our office, you can take your temperature. All of our superintendents have things that they can help take temperatures if they need to. And, just try to make sure that everybody is doing what they can. We really push people, if you're sick, stay home. Anybody, similar to Ken, anybody that is positive, we send the entire crew home to quarantine with pay until they either have that negative test or they've followed the CDC guidelines and can come back to work. And our HR director has become, kind of our COVID-19 expert. I think he's seen your face, Trent, more than he's seen anybody else's face, just watching all the videos and trying to keep up with things. But really just trying to make sure that we understand where we are today, because the rules still continually change, making sure that we're doing everything that we can keep people safe. Most of our crews already wore the neck gaiters just because of wind and sun and all of that. So it wasn't anything new to them to put a mask on. And we did actually, purchase neck gaiters for them as well. So you kind of have an option on what you want to wear. But just trying to make sure that we are creating an environment where everybody feels safe, that they are safe. When we brought people back to the office, we requested that our sales staff stay at home and work remotely. So they are now able to go visit clients if they're comfortable with that, or they can do Zoom calls. But we did not want them coming in and out of the office and bringing in that extra liability. And it also allowed us to use their office space to make sure that everybody in the office is separated. So everybody's got that 6 feet distance. We don't wear masks at our desk, but the moment that you get up, you put a mask on, and anywhere that you're in a common area, you wear a mask. If I were to go into another employee's office to talk to them about something, I'm going to wear a mask. I would recommend that they wear a mask as well, but it's on the person coming into their office to make sure that they're wearing the mask. We want to make sure that everybody's safe and that they feel safe. So just trying to make sure that you're creating an environment of safety as well as being safe.
Sure, and that culture of safety is is what carries through a lot of the roofing contractors that are out there, and a lot of what you said, ties into our next point, which is HR related issues, and safety and HR have been tied sort of hand in hand, and then you get the legal component as well. This HR directors and staff that are out there that are listening to this, you guys, should get combat pay for all the different things that you've had to deal with over the last year or so. We started off with the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. There were a couple of different components there with paid sick leave and family medical leave. What's interesting is in this latest stimulus plan, they're talking about bringing this back, and this was sort of a nightmare from an administrative standpoint to track a lot of all this. Now, obviously, there are tax credits available, if you do have to provide additional paid time off. But from everything I've heard from HR directors out there, not a big fan of the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA claims, this came in a lot, and it's also come up a lot with vaccines. We've had some questions I see about vaccines, so I'll be addressing some of that in the next few slides. It's interesting that when you have COVID-19, I mentioned before that you're allowed to ask a lot of the questions and engage in temperature checks and other things that normally you couldn't do, right? And navigating all these different acts and figuring out what's going on has been incredibly complex. So one of the things that we have to be mindful of, especially when, for example, a crew member gets COVID-19, is you've got to maintain confidentiality to a certain extent. Like it's hard. Look, if you've got a 4-man crew and one person's missing, you're going to know who that is, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious, but you can't say, hey, John Smith has got COVID-19 and send a company-wide email out, because that could potentially result in a confidentiality breach. So navigating that and understanding that has been very complex. And then the vaccine issue is something that is on the tip of everybody's tongue right now. It's something that people are wondering. I saw some poll results that were posted, and it looks like roughly 46% plan to create a voluntary program, which is kind of what I've seen. Most people are not going to mandate vaccines, but there's a variety of business considerations when you're dealing with this, right? Just because you can mandate vaccines, it doesn't mean that you should. And the reason is that there's a variety of concerns, right? If you mandate vaccines, if you say all of your employees have to get vaccines, there are a couple of very specific exceptions to that. One is if, for example, they belong to a religion that doesn't believe in that. Okay, you could potentially end up in a discrimination type Title VII issue. The other is if they've got a medical reason why they can't take a vaccine. Okay, that's an ADA issue. And not to mention that there's a potential morale issue. It is in some places I could see where it's necessary. Like, for example, if you have a crew that is working on nursing homes, right? Or if you've got a crew where your customer is saying you must be vaccinated. But in general, from an employer perspective, you want to think about how do you handle that. There's a variety of other things. What if somebody objects to it? What if who bears the cost of this? You want to think about it strategically. If you do implement any kind of plan, regardless of whether it's voluntary or mandatory, you want to stagger the schedule for the vaccines, because we have had some contractors that have had employees have some adverse effects. They're temporary, but they may not feel well and they may have to take additional paid time off. Okay. And that's something that you want to think about. Make sure that you're in constant communication with your healthcare providers and your benefits providers, because they may have some guidance and some ideas as well on how to incentivize people to obtain vaccines, because it's something that I think a lot of the customers may ultimately demand. What's one of the biggest questions that I've had, I guess, since probably October of last year was we don't have a customer saying you must be vaccinated to go on this job now, but the bids that we're getting ready to submit, they are saying, yes, you need to have a vaccinated crew. So what do we do there? Okay. Can that customer require that? The answer is yeah, absolutely they can require that. They can't require it necessarily if you've already got a signed contract without some additional consideration. But if this is something you're bidding or something that's coming up, yeah, clearly they can do that. And that's something that you need to be mindful of. So if you are going to engage in a contract like that, you need to make sure that you've got the production capability to handle that, meaning that you've got a crew and then some that are vaccinated, so that if you have one or two people go down for whatever reason, you can still comply with that contractual requirement. A lot of very complicated issues. You know, it's been interesting to see, you know, exactly how all this plays out. And that's kind of when I want to turn to you guys. You know, how have you dealt with HR employee-related issues arising out of COVID-19? And what are your thoughts on vaccines in the workplace? You know, it's something that it can be somewhat contentious here and there. And I'm just curious to see how you guys feel about it. So Ken, I'm going to start with you on this one. You know, what are you, what HR issues have you guys had to navigate? I know you've touched on a few, and what are you doing about vaccines?
Yeah, so some of the bigger issues on the HR side was just tracking, you know, just having the paperwork behind it, who was sick, when were they sick, when are they going to come back to work, communicating that, trying to protect their privacy, like you were saying. And we just came into this whole world of suspicion. That's what we call it. Whether a person was positive or not, we just said, oh, there was suspicion. So they're sitting home and waiting it out. Right? This way we could protect it. And that was our general response. A couple other things we were doing, if a crew, as soon as the crew gets to the job site, they get set up, they're going to start work. We take a picture of the entire crew, fully harnessed and ready to go. And the mask has now become part of your PPE, right? So you have to have your mask on, everyone's wearing it, and that's documented, uploaded with the rest of the photos for the job site. And then when it comes to the vaccine, you know, Jennifer got hers. Jennifer's in healthcare, my better half, and she got it first week of December. No issues whatsoever. And I was just thinking, you know, if our entire healthcare system is getting the vaccine, and these are the people who probably know more about health than anyone, then I have no problem offering that or requesting that people get it themselves. There's this little back and forth as to whether or not you need one if you've already had it, and how long they last and the effectiveness and all that kind of stuff. But you know what, we'll figure that over time. But I know personally, if they're going to make me get a vaccine so I can travel again, sign me up. I don't want to get in front of somebody with a comorbidity or somebody who's higher risk, but if that's what I need to get back to normal, so be it. And I think we're going to get back to normal really quick here, so prepare for that.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I'm eligible, I'm going to get it, especially when I have to travel and I'm on the road again. You know, I just think it's a good precaution. So I probably personally will get it. Michelle, let me ask you, you know, what's Rackley doing? You know, how have you kind of navigated the vaccine related issue, and is there any specific HR issue that you've had to, you know, that you guys have had to adjust to based on COVID-19?
I would say I agree with you both. Personally, I will end up getting the vaccine just for travel purposes. I think that's going to be the number one thing that needs to happen. We are in a very conservative state, and not to speak about politics, but we have a lot of employees that have already kind of, you know, oh, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that. So we're treading that very, very lightly. And I think that we would definitely, you know, if we were going to do something, it would be voluntary. It would not be mandatory. But again, it's something that we kind of have to tread very lightly on, just based on our location. But one of the HR things that we dealt with very early on, our very first case of COVID-19 at Rackley, the employee got it from his spouse, and he went home. We sent the crew home. We did all the things that we could do. But at the very beginning, to come back to work, you had to get a negative test. He was positive for 6 weeks. And having to navigate that, we have an employee that is ready, willing, and able to work, and we could not put that employee back to work. We did pay him, but dealing with that, you know, how do you handle that situation? So we were contacting you guys. We were trying to figure out what we could and could not do. And then moving forward, we were very leery. You know, do we ask somebody for a negative test, or do we just wait until they're fever-free and symptom-free for 72 hours? So all those sorts of things came into play. And that was really the point that our HR director decided, you know, I've got to become an expert on all these things and make sure that I understand what's a recommendation, what do we have to do, what are we obligated to do. But that was difficult for us, you know, having an employee out for that length of time. And he's just as frustrated as we are because he just wants to work. He's not wanting to sit at home. So that was the biggest thing for us. Since then, it's, you know, the rules have changed a lot, and we've been able to do some other things, but that was the biggest one for us.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're hearing on our end as well, is nobody understands fully what's going on with COVID-19, right? And there's all these weird things that are happening that hopefully someday we'll have a full understanding of it. But there are these outlier issues that a lot of roofing contractors have had to deal with. And John, briefly, what have you seen, I guess from a COVID-19 vaccination standpoint? What are you hearing from contractors out there? Is it more of the same, or is there some reticence? What are you hearing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll absolutely get the vaccine myself too. Anything that can give freedom at this point, I'm on board with, and I hate hassles. So I think you are going to have to carry vaccination cards at some point to get in certain places. So why not? I'm tired of like everybody else, we're tired of it. So what I am seeing, just to jump on it, we are seeing a lot of starting to get preliminary changes coming in, requesting that when the vaccines are available, that their crews will need to be vaccinated to go to these jobs that are coming up. So we are seeing that. We've done some surveys. I've seen some surveys out there. We're actually in construction in the general. It is 50-50 whether a construction worker will get a vaccination or will not get a vaccination. So that's not a positive as far as getting it. I do think you're going to have to be prepared for that. You're going to see it be required at different levels by the customer again, no matter what it is, what the customer is, they're going to start requiring. I think you're going to see even split at 50-50. You're going to have homeowners that are going to want to see that vaccination before you come on their job. So it's going to be there. So you do have to find creative things, your HR department, to try to helpfully get it. But I will add one thing. There's a lot of subcontract labor out there that our industry uses. We all know it. It's there. We've seen it. That's going to be an issue too, of how you're going to track who has a vaccination or who doesn't when you go to do work in the future. So I think you need to look at these very carefully, how you do it, but it's going to be an issue to probably put a bigger strain on our workforce than we've already been facing.
Yep, good point. So we got a couple of minutes left, guys, and what I want to do is turn to a sort of a final question, and that is we've been through a lot, but what's the silver lining, and what does the future look like for roofing? So in the 2 minutes we've got left, Michelle, what are your thoughts?
I would say for us, we always have tried to be innovative and be kind of on the cusp of whatever's happening with technology. And we knew that we had some advantages, but being able to shut down quickly and get everybody working from home quickly in a matter of 4 hours was really wonderful. And we actually were able to do the same thing a couple of weeks ago when we were hit by an ice storm and our offices were shut down for a week. We did the exact same thing. We sent everyone home and everybody was able to work. And I mean, roofers couldn't work on the roof, but we could actually, get office work done, invoices out and all those sorts of things and keep things going. So being able to know that we can quickly pivot was probably the most important thing for us to learn, and something that'll stick with us forever.
Great. Ken, how about you?
A couple things. First of all, the silver lining for us is probably what's about to come. We're really good at adapting to change now and quickly. So I don't think we can look at this and start resting. I think there's a ton of change that's about to happen. Regulations, market shifts, availability of materials, pricing issues, regulations. There's a lot going on. I would say be cautious about overreacting to things, but be diligent, keep your ears to the grindstone, and get ready to continue the change.
So John, we've got about 30 seconds left. Give me a brief take on what you think the silver lining is.
Okay, last year this time we were all live at an event and we looked at technology, certain things being 5, 10, maybe 15 years off. I could tell you that's now 2 years off maximum on a lot. Robotics, there's more changes you're going to see in our industry in the next 3 to 5 years than you could possibly imagine. So you need to stay on top of all of it. And those who stay on top and embrace it are going to be the leaders of the industry.
Agreed. My silver lining is that we have shown that as an industry, we are resilient, we stick together, and we can conquer anything that's out there. On behalf of my esteemed panel, I want to thank everybody for attending this webinar. I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you again.